Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 195 based on novel. So let's start. The world Qin Mu had entered was strangely cruel. Even though he'd passed by many battlefields before, the sight in front of his eyes was still shocking to his heart. The art of healing can't save this world. Qin Mu shook his head. His healing could only save a few people. If he wanted to get to all the injured in this battlefield, he would need months. There was one small battle every 3 days, and one big battle every 5 days. He didn't have the ability to heal everyone at such a rate. He raised his head to look at the sky. The irregular suns in the sky dimmed and became red. The 2 suns were fixed and never moved. It was probably also set that at a certain hour they would just start to dim. The god that created these 2 suns had good ideas, but his attainments in algebra weren't high. Qin Mu looked away, feeling that the suns were burning his eyes. Too ugly. If I continue to look at them, I won't be able to resist going to repair them. He moved slowly around the sacrificial altar while mobilizing his vital qi to execute Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. His spirit embryo and soul merged to form primordial spirit, combining his spirit and body into one. His primordial spirit stepped on the spirit platform and united the 6 directions. With sun and moon above his head, his vital qi moved, flowing through all parts of his body. His hair fluttered gently. In the fight, he had seen what made the divine arts practitioners of this world so powerful. Experiencing life and death of the battlefield had subconsciously changed his mentality for the better. Since the battle with first ancestor human emperor, he had been depressed. When fighting, he couldn't even execute his moves and was scolded fiercely by Butcher. It wasn't because he didn't dare to make a move. He just felt that no matter what move or what divine art he executed, they were all wrong. The reason why they were wrong wasn't because his confidence had suffered a setback from facing first ancestor human emperor. The problem lay in the fact that the clash had raised his horizons to a height he had never imagined before. When standing there and looking down on all the moves and divine arts he had learned before, he saw flaws everywhere. His horizons were high, but his foundation wasn't enough for him to change and enter the next realm, so he could not execute any moves or divine arts. He felt that they would be broken anyway, and he would die in the next instant. He had treated his opponents as first ancestor human emperor, which was why he had this kind of feeling. Yet on the battlefield, Qin Mu didn't have the time to think about all that. The situation there changed every instant, so he couldn't care if there were any flaws in his moves. He could only execute them and kill all the powerful enemies or die. After the battle, Qin Mu felt that he had stepped to the threshold of a huge transformation. As long as he crossed that gate, he would definitely see a piece of blue sky, a vast road ahead of him. His body began to shine with splendid sunlight as his vital qi moved within him, connecting the spirit embryo, 5 elements, and 6 directions. The sun, moon, and stars gave off light that lit up the divine treasures, turning him into something like a person of light. Even the celestial being divine treasure in his body shone, until the door to it could be seen. Meanwhile, below 6 directions divine treasure, a deep and dark door was also faintly discernible. It was the door of life and death realm, which connected to Yudu. Qin Mu walked at a steady speed. In Little Jade Capital, he had observed the divine treasures of Little Jade Capital's god Qin Chongming for quite a long time. From then on, he had begun to improve his divine treasures and patch up whatever he was lacking. Roar. The vital qi in his body shook and gave off waves of dragon roars. Dragon qi coiled around his body, worming in and out to temper it. Suddenly, with his hands as knives, Qin Mu attacked while walking around the border of the sacrificial altar. The wind grew louder, and knives fell like rain, midnight battle across stormy cities. The sun rose and jumped out of the surface of the sea. Sun on east sea 1,000-layer waves. A golden knife adorned with white jade pierced the night, with its light through the window. Man of 50 years, yet nothing made carrying knife, in 8 wilderness all alone. After a crisis comes hope, and the whole journey becomes nothing but smoke. In the vast and bloody battlefield, Butcher's knife skills suddenly became very moving and alive, reflecting the calamity of the world. Qin Mu's knife skills became faster and faster. Suddenly, the knife lights vanished. The wind, the rain, the sun, the sea, they all vanished as well. Qin Mu put his fingers together into a sword, and his vital qi vibrated to form a sword thread. He gently flicked and smeared it, his sword skills incomparably exquisite. Suddenly, they became faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, his long sword swept through the air and danced above the sky of the sacrificial altar like a silver flood dragon. Qin Mu walked around the sacrificial altar while the sword light sweeping through the air, becoming faster and faster, more and more urgent. The calamity of Supreme Emperor Heaven had allowed him to gain something, and this subconsciously made him release all of his emotions. He learned through his sword skills, through his vital qi. Third form of sword picture, Calamity of High Emperor. Yet when the calamity was at its fiercest point, Qin Mu suddenly dispersed all sword light, and his sword finger suddenly tapped at the heart of his brows. It not only touched the physical place on his body, but also the heart of his spirit embryo's brows. All his spirit, sword qi had been gathered in his finger. He had comprehended what calamity meant. Calamity was a disaster in which people struggled for their lives. It was finding hope in hell, a hero like Butcher using his knives to carve it for people, a human emperor like village chief undertaking hardship and toiling for everyone throughout his life, and also the struggle of people behind the back of a hero. It was the life of burying the dead every day. Qin Mu's 2 fingers stabbed forward, and a rainbow-like sword stretched across 10 miles. In the sky, one of the half-suns had dimmed, and only the sword light could be seen. While it shone in the sky, Qin Mu stood on the sacrificial altar in a daze. That move had nothing to do with village chief's sword picture. Suddenly, the youth felt that he had his own path. Just this sword skill alone still isn't enough for me to defeat first ancestor human emperor. Qin Mu put away his sword and looked at Supreme Emperor Heaven that was shrouded in darkness. When he did that, the astonishing sword light in the sky vanished. On the battlefield, crackling flames were still blazing, yet to be extinguished. The smell of burning flesh was everywhere. Qin Mu had vented all of his emotions and feelings in that sword earlier, and reached a height that he had never achieved before. However, there was still quite a large difference between first ancestor human emperor and him. Yet without first ancestor human emperor's pressure, and without the encounter in the dark realm, it would have been very hard for him to take that step, to walk out of village chief's sword picture, of Butcher's knife skills. When he had stabbed with that sword, it hadn't been just him founding a sword skill that belonged to him. He had also attacked the dark clouds that had been clouding his heart lately. Sanghua looked at his back. The youth's sword training on the sacrificial altar left a deep impression on her. It was especially so for his last move, when he had tapped the heart of his brows and stabbed with a sword. The mood hidden inside it had unleashed on a great scale. Suddenly, she could almost see a world changing due to a reform, countless ambitious people fighting in foul wind and bloody rain, rushing forward after someone. In the sword skills that Qin Mu had executed earlier, their intricacy had dispersed the spirit. Even though sword treading mountains and rivers was imposing and had the spirit of a heavenly god advancing courageously, it was only describing the mountains and rivers. Sword of founding Emperor Sea of Blood was overflowing with murderous intent and was overbearing, having the aptitude of the sword god, but the sword will was commemorating the martyrs, still obsessed with the past. Calamity of High Emperor was full of sorrowful, describing the death of High Emperor era. These three sword skills had their pros, but they also had their cons. In terms of spirit, Sanghua felt that they were all inferior to Qin Mu's last move. As to which were better in battle, she couldn't say clearly. Superb sword skill. She stood up and came to Qin Mu's side. What sword skill was that? Calamity sword. Qin Mu turned his head and saw her walking over. She then raised her head to look into the distance. Suddenly, a gale swept in their faces and transformed into an incomparably handsome tiger. It had yellow and black stripes, which were swirling with the movement of the fur and looking extraordinarily impressive. Small tufts of soft fur grew on his ears as well, able to rotate in all directions. Superb sword skill. That sword skill was indeed impressive. The tiger god walked up the stone steps of the sacrificial altar. When he was halfway up, his feet left the ground and he transformed into a tiger-headed god which walked up to Qin Mu. His voice boomed when he spoke. Why is it called Calamity Sword? The tiger god was Saint Woodcutter's mount, who had been summoned to this world along its lord. He had carried Saint Woodcutter into battle, and was very brave. Qin Mu's heart moved slightly. The black tiger god returning from the front lines meant that its lord had quelled the devil gods in the front lines. The change of heaven and earth means a great calamity. Heaven and earth may change not only because of natural disasters, invasion of heavenly devils, nor people dying to fire and floods. The change of heaven and earth is also a change in thinking of the people and a reform of divine arts, turning skills into great Tao. The tiger god turned to him and sneered as he walked up. Changing the people's hearts, divine arts, laws, paths, what a haughty tone. Just your sword skill alone, can it change this world, change this universe, change the thinking of every living being? Your sword skill isn't bad, but your heart is too ambitious. Qin Mu's gaze became fervent, and his tone filled with excitement. If people's hearts change, they won't fear gods anymore, and when people won't fear gods, the gods will have no power. When this happens, divine arts will be free to be changed. With that, laws will change, and so will the paths. Just like that, the heaven and earth will change too. Sanghua looked at the youth beside her who was full of spirit. Even when facing the black tiger god with extraordinary aura, he wasn't fearful in the least. Qin Mu raised his hand and pointed at the miserable battlefield in the darkness. His voice was slightly hoarse, but it was also heart-gripping in the night. Look! This is the calamity gods and devils have thrown on us, for the people to keep the gods and devils in awe, to fear and respect, worship them. My calamity sword then shall open the calamity of changing people's heart, one of changing divine arts and paths. From there, I'll change the world. He became more and more passionate. Even though Sanghua couldn't understand what he was saying, she could sense the passion burning in his heart. The youth seemed to have an infectious charm that could make people listen to him, unable to resist getting influenced by his emotions. That black tiger god came to the bottom of the sacrificial altar in a few steps. His body far surpassed that of Qin Mu and the rest, and so put extremely strong pressure on them. This tiger god looked down at Qin Mu before smiling as his whiskers spread apart. I knew you were remarkable. I don't understand all you've said, but I felt that they were powerful words. What's the name of this move of yours? Qin Mu raised his head to look up at him and said solemnly, this sword skill is called Opening Calamity. The black tiger god was slightly stunned. Opening the calamity for the change in people's heart. For the change in divine arts. For the change in paths. Great name. Sanghua also understood some of it. The youth beside her that had come from a different world was going to send a calamity to the gods and devils that were making their lives miserable, and so the skill was called Opening Calamity. It walked the route of reform, improving the ways of the past and changing the lives of gods and devils. How many moves does your calamity sword have? The the Black Tiger God asked. Qin Mu blushed and muttered, "So far only one move. I feel that I've already used up all my knowledge just to create this move." "That should be about right. You couldn't have accumulated much at your age." The whiskers of the Black Tiger God stuck to his face. "At your age, to be able to found a sword skill is already pretty remarkable. I'm under the orders of my lord to fetch you. He is coming to blows with someone and needs you, follow me." Qin Mu was slightly stunned, but he couldn't help growing excited. "Saint Woodcutter wants to see me." The Black Tiger God returned to his true form and said, "Didn't you hear clearly? He was fighting with someone when he suddenly thought of you, so he wants you to go over. Come onto my back. There are still dangers on the path with the devils running around, so you couldn't reach the place by yourself. Saint Woodcutter is fighting with someone. Bah, if he is fighting, why does he need me there?" Qin Mu was puzzled, but he still jumped onto his back. Sanghua hurriedly jumped up as well while saying, "My father is also on the front lines. I want to look for him." The gorgeous tiger god in black and yellow sprinted to the front lines. His speed was extremely fast. Even though his body was huge, he was covered with lean muscles and was completely silent when he ran. There was no sound at all. Much faster than Fatty Dragon. Qin Mu gripped his fists tightly and suddenly felt his heart aching. Even though the dragon Qilin was much faster than before, his steps were still heavy and would even shatter mountain rocks when he ran at full speed. Sanghua looked at the pitch-black night, slightly worried. They had left the battlefield and leaped across the front lines. They were heading for Li City, in which the devils had their camp. Many devil gods gathered there, and among them was also true devil Fu Riluo. Back when Li City had been invaded, it was Fu Riluo who had attacked personally. He executed his devil technique and massacred countless people in the city. Even 2 true gods of Supreme Emperor Heaven were killed by him. He was truly fearsome. The Black Tiger God leaped across the army and went straight for the city. With such actions, wasn't he just seeking death? How do the divine arts practitioners of Supreme Emperor Heaven determine if a person has the aptitude of a true god? Qin Mu remembered, asked a girl beside him after remembering it. "How do you guys cultivate?" Sanghua suppressed the unease in her heart and said, "First, we look at the aptitude. Spirit bodies that have the aptitudes of kings won't have bad aptitudes. If they get a famed teacher, their corporeal bodies can reach the extent of a young true god. Other than that, our Supreme Emperor Heaven also has a test that is called God Suppression Pagoda. Those who are able to walk out of the pagoda will be recognized as those who have the aptitude of a true god." Qin Mu blinked at her. "God Suppression Pagoda? What is it?" Before Sanghua could answer, the Black Tiger God's voice reached them. God Suppression Pagoda is a treasure from founding emperor era, and is used to test the attainments of a corporeal body. If a person one can pass, it doesn't really mean that they have the aptitude of a true god, just that their corporeal body barely reaches the extent of a young true god. Among those who have passed God Suppression Pagoda in Supreme Emperor Heaven, at most half have the aptitude of a true god. Being a true god is beyond difficult. So where's the logic in anyone becoming a true god, just by cultivating the techniques of true god diligently? Sanghua also couldn't help becoming curious. "Senior, in that case, what is considered to have the aptitude of a true god?" The true aptitude does not only lie in the corporeal body, but also in the primordial spirit, which is split in spirit and soul. Has your spirit embryo reached the aptitude of a true god? Has your soul reached the aptitude of a true god? Other than primordial spirit, there's still the frame of mind. But even if reaches the god realm, it still isn't enough to become a true god, because other those things, there's also divine arts and paths, the Black Tiger God explained. The divine arts practitioners, who you guys see as having the aptitude of a true god, are still a long way from becoming such. For example, youth, what is your name? My name is Qin Mu. He then hurriedly added, the current Heavenly Saint Cult Master. Heavenly Saint Cult Master. Never heard before. Qin Mu's expression became black. Ever since Heavenly Devil Cult was founded, everyone had viewed Saint Woodcutter, and the Patriarch and the Sacred Teachers. Never would they have expected for his mount to not have even heard of them. The Black Tiger then continued with his speech. For example, Qin Mu, his abilities aren't weak, but in your eyes, his corporeal body has not reached the aptitude of a true god. Yet with his strong abilities, he's able to fight against those so-called divine arts practitioners with the aptitude of a true god. That's because I'm the Overlord body. Qin Mu said with excitement. Overlord body. Never heard before. The Black Tiger god sprinted through the night while speaking. Your sword skill is almost close to the realm of path, so your comprehension of paths, skills, and divine arts is almost at the aptitude of a true god. Your frame of mind is slightly weaker, though, and not strong enough. As for the primordial spirit, it's very powerful, and can be considered first class among the divine arts practitioners of the current generation. That's why he has the strength to fight against young experts with the aptitude of a true god. We're at Lee City. In front of them, flames rushed into the sky. A magnificent city was shrouded in the light. On top of it, devil gods and countless devils stood. Sanghua looked at this sight in fear. Yet the devil gods and devils didn't stop the Black Tiger god, letting them into the city without a word. Sanghua was extremely nervous. The Black Tiger god had brought them into the enemy's nest, so could he have turned sides? However, he is a god. There would have been no need to lie to us. If he wanted to kill us, he could have just taken us down or eaten us. Even though logic said that, she still felt nervous in her heart. After all, they were in the enemy's camp. The devil race had existed in Supreme Emperor Heaven for some 20,000 years, and in her memory, they were all fiendish and utterly evil. If anyone landed in their hands, it would be fortunate for them to find death. And now, they were in their camp. She looked around and saw countless devils staring at them. The heavenly devils sent chills down her back. They looked like hungry beasts hiding in the darkness, ready to pounce and tear them into pieces. Sanghua's palms were covered in cold sweat. Her gaze landed on one devil god, and she couldn't shift it away. That man was topless, but his face didn't look like that of a normal human. There were only groups of flame markings that covered his whole body. His eyes were extremely strange, flickering in his eye sockets like two balls of fire. When he saw them, he smiled. Young lady, I've seen you before. Your family has died under my hands, right? Sanghua's hands formed into tight fists, but she didn't say anything. Qin Mu took a look at that devil god, and his pupils contracted. He remembered that the first time he met Sanghua, heavenly devils had attacked that city, and Sanghua's father had gone to defend when he was encircled. A devil god had then pushed his way toward Sanghua's family and killed most of the people. Back then, the sight had been terrifying. Even though he couldn't see Sanghua's face, he could feel her fear and anger. Qin Mu had run everywhere with her, and only then did she survive unscathed. Back then, Qin Mu and Sanghua had been in two different worlds, so he couldn't see the face of that devil god clearly, but judging from Sanghua's current expression, he could confirm that this topless devil god was the one that had massacred her family. The style of construction here is quite similar to that of our great ruins. I've seen numerous ruins of founding emperor era, and they are similar to the palaces here. Qin Mu suddenly smiled. Sister Sanghua, your Supreme Emperor Heaven might just be related to our great ruins. He wanted to divert her attention, but she was plagued with matters of the heart, and couldn't pay him much attention. The Black Tiger God answered instead. Supreme Emperor Heaven belonged to Founding Emperor. It was part of the first heaven of the 33 heavens, so it's not strange that the buildings look similar. Supreme Emperor Heaven is from Founding Emperor era. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently, and he cried out, "What kind of place is 33 heavens? Hasn't Founding Emperor era ended?" The Black Tiger God was bewildered. Founding Emperor era has ended. When did that happen? How could it have ended when Founding Emperor is still alive? As long as Founding Emperor is still alive, Founding Emperor era will never end. Qin Mu was flustered, and his heart pounded crazily. Founding Emperor era had yet to end. This news was too shocking. He immediately thought of his encounters in Great Ruins and Fengdu, how the Heavenly King's god statue had acted on Founding Emperor's orders and rode the dragon Qilin to kill the Dragon King, and how King Yama of Fengdu had mentioned Founding Emperor going to Carefree Village. These two matters were clear signs that Founding Emperor era had not yet ended. However, when the Black Tiger God said this personally, it still gave Qin Mu a great shock. Your frame of mind is unstable, so it will be bad for your fight later. The Black Tiger God was stern, and his voice loud. Your attainments in frame of mind aren't great to begin with, so won't you at least stabilize your mind? Qin Mu was muddle-headed. He asked in puzzlement, "What fight? We're here." The Black Tiger God suddenly stopped. And his body trembled, pushing Qin Mu and Sang Hua off. When the two of them landed on the ground, the Black Tiger God shook and transformed back into a tiger-headed god. He looked down and frowned at the two people. He then said loudly, "Mu Lord, these two people are useless, their minds are all flustered. They will probably lose miserably if you send them to fight." Sang Hua had seen the devil god that had almost wiped out her whole family, and her mind was agitated, making it hard for her to restrain herself. Qin Mu's mind was also shaken, but his by the information the Black Tiger God had told him. He was still in a daze, so neither of them was in a good state now. However, after hearing the Black Tiger God's words, the two of them came back to their senses and looked ahead of themselves. The sight astonished them. The palaces up ahead laid out in a picturesque disorder were extremely strange. Some of them were bathed in fire, but not destroyed. The flames seemed to be emanated by the palaces themselves, even though it left them almost transparent from the scorching heat. The youths could see the interior of the palaces from the outside. The flames lighted up the whole city like it was daytime. In the sky above the palaces, gods and devils were facing each other, and Qin Mu immediately saw Saint Woodcutter. He also saw numerous gods standing behind him. Among them was Sang Hua's father. Opposite them was a devil god that did not look like a devil, but was even somewhat refined and graceful. The only problem was that he didn't have ears. In the place of his left ear, there was a face, and it was the same where his right ear was supposed to be. Qin Mu couldn't see his back, so he didn't know if there was a face on the back of his head too. Suddenly, a black pillar rose that was several yards thick. It was like a black pagoda that stabbed diagonally the vast courtyard. An unbelievably huge axe was also sent into the plaza. That axe was almost as thick as the black pillar. Only now did Qin Mu notice that it wasn't a black pillar nor was it a black pagoda, but a huge spear. It crossed with Saint Woodcutter's axe and stood upright in the plaza. The two spirit weapons were too large, and cracks formed on the ground from the pressure. Enter the plaza. The Black Tiger God hurried them. Once the people in front die, it will be your turn. Qin Mu and Sang Hua walked forward to the borders of the plaza. There were several divine arts practitioners inside, all covered in blood. They were all adjusting their breaths while standing with armor. They should have come from the battlefield. On the other side, there were also other young divine arts practitioners, but they were devils. They should have also come from the battlefield, since a few had injuries. They all looked fierce and brave. "My lord, they are here." The black tiger god bowed to Saint Woodcutter in the sky above. "Why are their minds not peaceful?" The black tiger god immediately answered. "The cultivation of his frame of mind is simply too weak." When he heard it was still founding emperor era now, his soul wandered off. Saint Woodcutter gave him a stare, and the two long ears moved back and stuck to the back of the tiger god's head. He became submissive and didn't dare to talk. Saint Woodcutter looked at Qin Mu, who was flipped through his Daotai sack, before taking out a chunk of black iron. He then poked at the fire emanating from the palace. "Mind not at ease and a bouncy temper. I wonder if he's useful. Could I have been wrong in my judgment?" He clearly wasn't that curious and lively in the battlefield. The black iron in Qin Mu's hand was immediately affected by the heat, and got scorching to the touch. Qin Mu threw it down without any hesitation. The flames on the chunk of black iron had yet to extinguish when it became a pile of molten iron. It kept burning though, and in not even a breath's time, it changed into ashes. "No wonder this place is called Li City, this is actually Li Fire." Saint Woodcutter frowned slightly while a junior behind him cried out in astonishment, breaking the silence. "Not only is there Li Fire, but there's even Devil Fire," Qin Mu stated. The black tiger god couldn't help explaining, "This place was conquered by the devils and their fire is hidden inside Li Fire, which is their scheme. Don't touch it and be careful of burning yourself to death." "That's right. How did you know there's devil fire in Li Fire?" "Li Fire has high heat, and is good for forging since it can easily melt black iron, but it won't burn it cleanly," Qin Mu explained. "Devil Fire has a very terrifying corrosive characteristic, but its temperature isn't high. What melted black iron was Li Fire while what burned it cleanly away was Devil Fire." Suddenly, his eyes shined and the black tiger god jumped in shock. Devil Fire can be used to smelt spirit weapons, while Li Fire is an even better divine fire. "This trip is great. My sword pellet can be improved even more." Qin Mu cried out in excitement. Mute had taught him the marvel of smelting, and he knew the use of every kind of fire. Now that he could see two of them, he couldn't help becoming excited. He immediately took out an iron board and a frame, before taking out a black iron hammer. "Brother Tiger, you don't know it, but my sword pellet has already been cultivated to the flexibility of wrapping around a finger. Another step forward would be like flowing water. All this time, I couldn't find any high-quality flames, but now, I finally found some." Qin Mu took out his sword pellet, and looked at the dumbfounded black tiger god. He said with a smile, "Devil Fire can burn away black iron, but it can't burn black gold essence. My swords are made out of black gold essence with divine metal mixed into it. By smelting them with the Devil Fire, I can remove the impurities." The gods and devils in the surroundings were stunned. They saw Qin Mu quickly constructing a smelting table, before taking out a black felt apron to tie around his waist. He threw the flying swords onto the smelting table, then picked one to stuff into the flames. Clang! The sound of beating metal dispersed the solemn atmosphere. Qin Mu hammered each and every one of his spirit weapons seriously. Every strike of his was fully focused. "The one who threshes grains." Sanghua called out softly. "How do you know how to forge treasures too?" Qin Mu didn't raise his head when he said humbly, "I've learned it for over 10 years, so I'm slightly better at it than algebra." Sanghua stuck out her tongue and looked at him forging. Her heart suddenly calmed down from its flustered state. When her father had seen her having come as well, he frowned slightly and opened his mouth. However, he resisted speaking. Clang, clang, clang. Qin Mu forged continuously. Even though there were over a dozen gods and devils around, the only sound was that of him beating metal, and it was irritating everyone. Suddenly, The devil god opposite of Saint Woodcutter turned his head to face him with another face. He said pleasantly, Fu Riluo has finally met the heavenly master of the fake celestial heavens from back then. It's true that your reputation can't be compared to meeting you in person. This successor of yours is truly interesting, but are you sure you want him to fight for you? Saint Woodcutter had an indifferent expression. Cultivating a heart is like forging ironware. His heart was uneasy earlier, so he's merely using forging to calm his flustered emotions for his inner heart to calm down. This is a kind of profound cultivation method for the frame of mind, Fu Riluo. Can't you see that? Clang, clang, clang. Qin Mu swung his huge hammer up and smacked the blades non-stop. He didn't look like he was cultivating his heart at all. Instead, he looked like he was really forging ironware. The corners of Saint Woodcutter's eyes twitched, and he almost couldn't put up a straight face anymore. Why is he still beating them? Below, Qin Mu put away the swords that were done and took out another huge batch to be calcined in the fire. Veins popped out on Saint Woodcutter's forehead, but they were forced down by him straight away. Fu Riluo laughed loudly. It's hard for you to get rid of me, and I also can't get rid of you. In that case, let these juniors fight for us. Heavenly Master, if my side wins, you shall scram back and continue envisioning your beautiful dream. If your side wins, I'll leave Lee City to you. Saint Woodcutter hesitated for a moment, and the clanging reached his ears once more. Qin Mu was still beating the iron seriously. Nearby, Brilliant's injured city lord said in a low voice, Heavenly Master, don't worry, my Supreme Emperor Heaven also has young talents. They are all youths with the aptitude of a true god, and they won't be any weaker than Fu Riluo's disciple. Saint Woodcutter looked at Qin Mu was still beating the iron, and he could only nod. This video will end here.